welcome to Rabbit Holes with Aaron podcast, where we explore interesting topics. Today I have Aaron from Michigan as my guest, and I'm the host, Aaron Evans from Texas. Let's start our first rabbit hole today, which is going to be juvenile rat wrestling. So I think I have to introduce this because I was the one that read it in a book. And so I read that like when rats want to play so bad, and it's in the form of wrestling, but they want to play so bad that they like do a little work to open up the door to get to a bigger chamber from both sides so that the two of them can meet in the middle and they can wrestle. And so they wrestle and one rat wins. And maybe the bigger rat wins again the second time. And then at that point, the bigger rat realizes that he's got to lose approximately 40% of the time, at least, to keep the little rat wrestling, or the smaller rat, let's say. And so, like, there's this dynamic of, like, dominance where even though the bigger rat could win every time if he wants, the little rat would give up maybe after 10 times in a row. And so it speaks to, like, this dominance and how dominance plays a role in winning. And so even though the big rat can win every time and feel as dominant as possible from the situation, and maybe send a new rat in for him to wrestle with or something, instead he chooses to continue to work with that rat and lose to the other rat so that he can keep playing. And so let's take that to something a lot deeper, which is the thought in my brain right now, is what if our conscious mind, I thought at first our conscious mind was dominant and our subconscious mind is not as dominant. Well, because we're operating, I would guesstimate, in our conscious mind most of the time, right? And so, like, then I thought, okay, our conscious mind is dominant, our subconscious mind is not as dominant, and so the conscious mind is winning. But then I thought, well, that's not how it works at all. Maybe the subconscious mind is winning, and it lets the conscious mind think it's in charge, so that it keeps playing. What do you think about that?
I I agree. It's an interesting thought to ponder over whether or not like our active aware mind that's perceiving everything is more in control than our subconscious mind. And I feel I lean more towards like our subconscious mind as being more dominant. It is the thing that's rising, bringing thoughts to the surface. It is the thing that's absorbing everything. I kind of leaning more towards like the subconscious mind being more dominant, even though it's not the thing that is readily aware to what we're doing at the moment. It's almost like we're focusing on what our subconscious is feeding us instead of entirely focusing on our own genuine thoughts from the subconscious. Just bloop, something pops up, and then we kind of wrestle with that and think about it, and then something else pops up, or our subconscious plucks something from our memory at some other point in time in our life and is just kind of feeding what we're actively drawing our awareness to at the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I didn't think of any other rabbit holes with that, but I did. I mean, it's that deep, but bring it back out a little bit, and I think of people. And I think of people, we could take it into, a big, strong guy and a little bitty guy, full grown men, and, who's going to win? Chances are, you know, the big guy with the weight is going to win, right? Chances are, generally speaking. But I don't know. Do we see that in humanity where the dominant person is like, it's your turn to win? Actually, do you think of anything? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, do you definitely see how dominance plays a role in society? To answer that question, yes, definitely. It's like, um, mostly people who are in charge of businesses or corporations or guiding directions to places I would feel have a more aggressive and dominant personality or some sort of a trait that allows them to just kind of sometimes steer people in the direction that they want to go through aggressive measures or just more direct physical means like micromanaging or doing whatever to really drive their point home or their goal or their mission. So you can see it playing out, at least in businesses, to say the least, as it pertains with just run-of-the-mill people. Like, I think some people would use their size or their strength to try to intimidate and have other people back down from understanding or relating to the smaller person's opinion or would be more enjoyable for them. Like it's not too much different across species, right? Humans feel that we're more intelligent and we clear and make room and impose our will on top of other life forms that are on this planet, So, we definitely have a dominance as a species of human over what seems to be most other life form on the planet, shy of like viruses or bacteria or something. It doesn't seem like
Yeah,
some of those don't seem to care what
yeah.
we have to say, right? They're just going to do their own thing.
I think about dogs, right?
Yeah, dogs, a great example. They're very subordinate to people, and we're always domineering over them. I don't know if that was the direction you were thinking about taking that one, but
Well, I mean, no, I mean, yes, to some extent, right? I mean, it's holiday time. People get dogs because they're cute and puppies and give them to their 5-year-old or something else. And yeah, we know how that story goes. I don't even want to go down it, but like on the other side, like dogs are so keenly aware of other things, right? They hear frequencies we can't see.
mhm.
They're keenly aware of danger for some reason we can't figure out. Maybe they hear something, maybe they smell something. They can smell things we obviously don't smell. They can, check bags for explosives or drugs or whatever. It doesn't matter. You got them in a plastic Ziploc bag, double bagged inside of a, duffel or something. They're going to find it because they can smell somehow through the atoms, and so while they appear to be less dominant than us, and surely we can mistreat them a ton of ways. But if we work with them, we kind of gain an appreciation, and now you've got working dogs and combat dogs and police dogs, so it seems to be understood at some level that the dogs, even though they're subordinate, like we recognize their important role and we keep them and domesticate them. We feed them well and, so on and so forth.
Yeah, like if used compassionately and with an understanding that they have senses that are more capable than our own, we can cohabitate very peacefully with them and almost use them to help in times of need. I mean, dogs have been trained to smell various cancers. They're trained to smell people. They can help find people that are buried underneath rubble and earthquakes. They can hear things, like
Wow.
you said,
Yeah.
substantially more. They can hear things considerably better, right? So, like, I think if relationship with a dog has a higher potential to be more symbiotic in some sort, right? Like we're giving something to the dogs give something back to us, and whether it's like a trained dog or just your best friend, I suppose, right? There's a level of symbiosis that exists between the two of them, where everybody's kind of getting stuff together or everybody's kind of getting something that they want out of it, right? So I guess
Yeah.
that's kind of where my brain went when you were talking about dogs and their senses and how they work.
Well, and then I wonder about their subconscious because it seems like it makes you wonder if dogs are just conscious of everything they sense, Unlike us, where it's like, who knows what our subconscious can do, right? Is it psychic? Can we sense the electromagnetic waves off of somebody else's heart? You know, there's a lot of research going on right now in those kind of fields of like when one person enters the room, it changes the whole vibe in the room. Why is that? And they're looking at electromagnetic pulses from our hearts, and how they affect each other, and stuff like that. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to think about that. Are dogs like there's no conscious and subconscious? There's just everything's conscious,
Awareness. They're always
which
aware of
ends up
everything.
Yeah, which kind of ends up in the squirrel, right? Squirrel. Like I'm
Or
conscious, squirrel, squirrel. I'm conscious of everything, so anything can distract me.
yeah, but I think we as humans have like a deeper level of consciousness, right? Like while we can react to our environment, um, the same way a dog can. I mean, I personally am easily distracted, right? I might actually say squirrel when I see a squirrel run by,
Yeah,
but I think there's an added level of we as humans being able to be aware that we're aware, of things going on around us. I think the boundary gets pretty blurred there when it comes to things that are not human, whether they're dogs or plants or insects or birds or fish, fill in the blank, right? Like what is, that thing that allows us to be more aware, you know?
yeah. One allows us to focus our awareness. And really, you know, some of the books I've read with Jordan Peterson, it's like you can grab a hold and even focus your subconscious on your goals. Like you make a goal and you don't just focus your conscious mind on it. And actually, you probably focus your conscious mind the least on it. And you focus your subconscious self the most on a goal. And so, and you can tell because you're like, well, it's just like when you buy a new truck. Now you're like, well, nobody has this truck. This will be cool. And then you buy it. Then everybody has that truck. And you're like, wow, there's one. My next door neighbor has one. How did I not notice that? And everything pops into your awareness. I remember that was the way it was when I bought a Honda Ridgeline, right? I got a brand new Honda Ridgeline, new body style. I was like, nobody's going to have this truck. And then it's like, I'm parked beside one in traffic and I'm like, and then you start noticing hundreds of them, right? You're like, oh, he got a blue one, and oh, there's an orange one, and like you somehow by getting one and think it was special, your subconscious is like, well, buddy, it's not quite as special as you thought. You're going to see them every 5 minutes for the rest of your life, and even to this day, I don't even have a Ridgeline anymore, and I'm like, that's what they did with that body style, and I notice all Ridgelines all the time. So yeah. So with goals, we can focus our conscious and our subconscious, which is just crazy. It makes me think of the autonomic nervous system. Yeah, I think I said that right. Basically, the part of you that takes care of making sure you have a heartbeat, making sure you breathe, even when you're not thinking about it, probably digesting food and a lot of other, you know, underlying systems that are work in your body. And I just read an article just before this episode where it was talking about they found that hearts have their own mini brain in them.
I was going to bring that up earlier too.
Oh yeah, did you read that?
I don't know. So the only thing I'm really acutely aware of from the reading is that they found neurons around where our heart's at. So like in the things that I've listened to and read, right, some people genuinely think and feel things from their heart, right? Like there is some sort of a element that in finding neurons around there and whether the science backs up whether or not it's actually thinking and encompass or like incorporating with our conscious awareness, right? Some people
Yeah,
do genuinely feel that like, like in my heart it feels like this and like it's not a far stretch to think if you have some sort of neurons that are around your heart or whatnot that people are genuinely having feelings that come from the heart, right?
I like that. I'd never heard that, but I mean, I've heard people say that, and maybe I've even said it a couple times just to see how it felt, but I didn't know that there was brain. I mean, what is brain tissue? Neurons. So I don't want to say you got like some of the brains from up here, down here around your heart, but the neuron configurations. And I think what I was reading about was they were doing experiments on zebrafish, or it was something like that. And because it had a heart that was a similar shape and size as a human heart. And so they looked at that heart, and did experiments with that and found like, I mean, enough to say there was a mini brain. But I have known for many years about the vagus nerve that runs from your heart to your brain. and probably other systems. And they're like, what does this one do? I mean, we got the nerves that control everything. We've got those all mapped and routed out. What does this vagus nerve do? And it seems, man, I don't want to mess this up, but I think what I remember was it seems to be connected to your mirror neurons in your brain. So that when you see somebody feel something, you feel it too. When their heartbeat increases, your heartbeat increases. And I haven't experimented or messed with that really, in fact, but maybe it's true because like I'm a little nervous and you're a little nervous and we're not even by each other. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you're not
Right.
nervous at all. But the other thing I do know is I do pottery with people and I teach them how to do pottery. And there's sometimes they're worried they're going to mess it up. They start seeing maybe some defects in the way they're making it, and it's not turning out like they thought in their mind it was going to turn out. And I just have to do what I do now. I just have to take a deep breath and I start breathing for them too. And I tell them that, and I'm like, I know it's hard to breathe right now. I know you're a little bit worried, but just so you know, I'm breathing for you. Because here's what happens. I feel that stress. I start breathing fast or holding my breath. I start getting nervous and anxious. And then I'm like, wait a minute. I don't ever feel that way. Why do I feel that way? And I'm like, somebody else feels that way. Here, let me breathe for them. And I just like deep breaths because I am holding it. I'm holding their stress. And I'm like, and it just like depressurizes the room, so to speak. And then eventually what I'm doing transfers over to what they're doing. Now I do tell them about it sometimes. And then they start to relax too. And so it's kind of weird how my body is connected to their body, even though there's space between us. Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
I actually don't find it all that crazy. Like, I agree, like the dynamic and energy or aura or whatever vibration or frequency a person's putting off, like it is contagious, right? And I can't remember, there was a doctor I was listening to on a podcast at some point in time that was talking about this very thing. The auras that people put out or their frequency or vibration. I mean, it's not. I'm sure both of those work both just fine. And what she was saying is making sure you're aware of like your state is as important as, well, is very important, and just helping to make the state of other people around you matching yours, right? So if you go in, like you were saying, if you're
Sure.
anxious or stressed or depressed or something like that type of uh, energy, I suppose, that you bring into it impacts the people around you. I mean, I'm under the impression that it's also prevalent around your kids. If you're stressed or you're worried or you're concerned, a lot of those feelings or thoughts pass on to your kids. Um, yeah, I think it's important to always be aware, I guess, of how you're feeling and be in tune with your body and
Yeah.
just your overall state at the time, especially if you're wanting to, like what you're doing, if you're sitting there doing pottery and helping people and you're trying to open up and be of some service. I feel it would be important that you are also calm and relaxed and
Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, like, actually, that's exactly how I always enter my workshops. Not because I go through some kind of routine, but I just love doing pottery so much and I love teaching it and I feel confident about it. And yeah, so I guess I bring a vibe into the room, but that's really an interesting thought of being aware of your vibe because, so many, including me and maybe including you, of us think, here I am in my little bubble, affecting no one. Nobody knows what I'm going through, and that's okay. I don't want to feel stressed out about it. But all the time, we're giving off. I mean, you keep saying vibrations, frequencies, but to me, in shorthand, is like a vibe, right? We just keep giving off a vibe, you know, to all those people around us. And if it's a good vibe, okay. If it's a negative vibe, it's like a dark cloud enters the room, and you know, to what level are we responsible for that, or what can I do about it? I guess that's where that leads me.
yeah, a thought that came to mind just now was the elephant in the room, right?
Mm, Yeah, I like that you brought that up. That's such a good rabbit hole to go down. I mean, the elephant in the room instantly in my mind popped in. Now, it's something that Jordan Peterson read somewhere else, but in one of his books he talks about, in a house, and in this book this boy discovers a little dragon under his bed, and he takes it to his mom and dad. He's like, "Mom and Dad, I've got a dragon in my room." And they're like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." As parents are, a dragon, right? I can see myself there, But the longer they ignore it, the bigger it gets. So next thing you know, it's like laying in the front room, and they're like, "There's no dragon here. What are you talking about?" One day, the dad comes home from work and the house is up on the dragon's head. And, finally, everyone is forced to admit, like, we've got a problem here. There's a dragon that's bigger than our house, right? And as soon as they acknowledge it, say, "Well, I think it's time to talk about the dragon." And they do, and guess what? It shrinks down. Talk about it a little bit more. It shrinks down. And then it moves back down to like mouse size under his bed or whatever. And it was a childhood book that he was a kid's book, a story book with pictures that he was describing. Maybe I think it was one he read to his daughter or something when she was a kid. But yeah, it's such an interesting way to look at it. Of course, he goes deep and wide with it, rightfully so. But like, it's really the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room, that's something we don't really usually even mention, is that it grows. Whether it's strife in a marriage, or there's things we don't talk about, or eggshells, or whether it's a problem in the air conditioning or whatever, if we don't talk about it and we don't work on it, then it doesn't get smaller, kind of concept. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
Well, no, tying it into what you were just saying about kind of creates the elephant in the room, creates some sort of attention, and the longer it goes on, I guess it would be more prevalent in relationships where you're around, like you're sharing your bubble, I suppose, with another
Yeah,
person. They have, I would imagine that the longer you go about not talking about something that's irritating or bugging either just yourself or an issue that was unresolved that attempted to be talked about, whether it was an argument that you had with somebody or a disagreement or you hurt somebody's feelings, you didn't apologize, all of those things that go unresolved would just create a tension in a relationship. And that, I feel, would weigh on most people's minds, cause them to, I'm going to use the word close down or be in their own head or making less natural conversations, or a hesitation in wanting to talk or speak because you don't know what the other person's thinking or feeling or things of that
yeah,
nature. So I think the communicating is important, and doing it effectively and mindfully is a wonderful word, and definitely
I like that.
respectfully. No, I do. I think it's important to be not only mindful of yourself, but mindful of others. We're all doing the best that we can and have our own feelings and perspectives that lead us to feel or see the world or perceive the world the way that it is. I mean, we all kind of live in our own little personal delusions, um,
Mm, personal delusion.
or illusion, take your pick.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Take a quick moment and mention that if you would like to have some interaction with us and possibly offer some rabbit holes, you can do so through Patreon and become a member, and you'll get access to Discord channel where we're happy to talk to you and interact. And thanks again for listening. Hmm.
Suppose
What is the
suppose
difference
both
between
probably work.
a delusion and an illusion? What's the difference between those two? I really don't know.
I actually don't know either. I want to say illusion is just a thing that, no, I don't know. Delusion, I would say, is not based on reality in any capacity, and an illusion would be kind of more based in reality, but still not technically the
Well,
accurate representation of the thing that is true.
We might have to go to Google on a break or something.
Yeah,
Come
we
back.
might have to do something because I am curious now.
Yeah. I mean, just the idea, I'm just going to talk about it for a minute, maybe sound it out. Like, delusion just kind of has a bad feeling to it. It's almost like, I don't know, somebody, I mean, what do you say about somebody who's delusional? Like, they don't live in reality, kind of?
See, and
Whereas an
that's,
illusion,
yeah,
whereas an illusion, I don't know. I think about an illusion, and you can, I mean, you can look at 3D whatever a 3D picture, right? And at first it just like looks like blocks of color, but you zoom your eyes out, and all of a sudden it's the Golden Great Gate Bridge or something. It was there all the time, but it's got the illusion of flatten. Well, it's got the illusion of 3D, the picture does, but it looks flat. I don't know. Maybe that's not a good analogy, but or a good metaphor. But there's so many illusions. We live in our own illusions, right?
yeah, and
So many.
sometimes delusions. I did look it up if you'd like the if you'd like
Okay,
to hear
go.
what it
Yes.
says, right? So overall, an illusion is a misperception or something that is not as it seems. A delusion
Mm,
is a dangerous misperception or an incorrect belief that is not based in reality.
mm,
So I think illusion
okay.
would be a little bit more fitting for most cases here, because a lot of us are basing things off of however we're perceiving reality. And a delusion would just be unfounded. Like, right, it's not based on reality, a gross misinterpretation of events or lies that you've told yourself for soothing measures, maybe I think this would be how I wrap that one up.
Hmm. Well, that does sound like a good rabbit hole for another time.
What is reality? That's a solid question.
I mean, that may be too deep of a rabbit hole for any given hour. That's like a four-part series. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm just joking. But let's see. So do we pass by any rabbit holes that you wanted to explore a little bit more so far? I
No,
like the
not at the
elephant in the
moment.
room.
Yeah.
The elephant
Yeah,
in
I
the
mean,
room,
just
and like, how do you start to become aware of what if, what if you just decide, I mean, you read a good book, I mean, I don't know, and you start to say, you know what? I think I'm going to be honest about everything. I don't care who it is that asks me, who that talks to me. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell the truth. Now, not the brutal truth, like you're ugly, because that's really an opinion, or, you're stupid, or, this is just mean things that can be said, but like, I don't think that's a good idea, or, whatever, fill in the blank. Because so many times we trade being nice for comfort right now, and being nice is not telling the truth in exchange for long-term turmoil and distress and suffering, right? Instead of telling somebody the truth about a situation, we're like, it'll be okay. Don't worry about it, you know, especially in the framework of a relationship. What do you think about that?
well, the first thing that immediately comes to mind is there's always a way to be true to yourself and feelings while being mindful of the other person's feelings. And while it's a tricky thing to navigate, I suppose, if you're used to just kind of yelling, talking, and domineering over a conversation, right? But there's always a way to be able to genuinely express yourself in a manner to another person, which I believe is what stemmed this thought, right? Um, it's just always a way. There is a peaceful resolution through compassion and love and understanding and really empathizing with somebody else's feelings in the matter. There's always a peaceful resolution. Sometimes it's hard to find the words, and sometimes we find it challenging to express ourselves the way that we want, you know,
Yeah,
for fear of saying the wrong thing or persecution about your beliefs over a situation. So there's a lot of things that go into um, having mindful conversations with other people. Because as I mentioned before, we're all just doing what we can, kind of really, you know. And it is important to just fully realize that other people have their feelings, views, and opinions as well. Understanding, as long as somebody's not intentionally trying to mislead or manipulate you, right? Intent would be very important in conversations. But I think anybody being genuine and sincere and not coming from a place of anger or hate or a lack of empathy for another person should is genuinely interpreted as or generally interpreted as genuine, you know. I don't think yelling
Mm,
accomplishes anything or dismissing other people's perspectives, you know.
yeah. Well, I guess I understand what you're saying and where you're going, and I agree. I guess the thing I was talking about was the truth. I wasn't able to really get my hands wrapped around it, but I thought about it. And, well, let's talk about our daily lives. Our daily lives, not our daily lives. How are you doing today, Aaron? You know?
Right.
Well, I didn't sleep good last night. I drank too much alcohol. My relationship is falling apart, and this isn't either one of us, so
Yeah.
theoretically, right? But this is what's going on in our mind, right? On our worst of all days, I'm okay. I'm not bad. Let's talk about our daily lives. Let's talk about how are you feeling? Well, am I going to talk about sad, jealous, lonely, angry? No, no, I'm not going to tell anybody any of those things, although that's the truth. I'm going to tell them that, just another day in paradise or whatever my pithy response to how I'm doing, you know. And I understand there's like some social convenience, like, hey, I'm passing by you and waving my hand. I don't have time for an hour-long discussion because I'm going somewhere and you're going somewhere. But so I understand that, and I understand it. But at the same time, I understand, say, well, I really can't get to it right now, but super good. Or I really can't get into it right now, but super terrible or whatever. Let's put a pin in that and I'll see you on lunch break, or I'll see you tonight, and I really can talk about it then, or something, or call me later, or something. I like to think about how people like to not tell the truth for the sake of time or for the sake of other people's feelings. I don't know. It's the way things are. So,
Well,
you know,
one could almost question like the human nature and being closed off to people, right? It's almost like I don't even think it's human nature. It's just more of a conditioning that society's placed on us. Not, I don't even think it's
mm,
society that places it on you, right? Men, for example, are told, suck it up. You can't have feelings. You can't have emotions, right? Like there's some level of that that exists in society today, and you
right.
you get the answers. Oh, living the dream, or just another day, or fill in the blank of every other comment that men have used when inside they're dying, I suppose, right? Or anybody else,
Yeah,
right? I feel women are more likely to share their emotions, but men, it almost seems like taboo to share your emotions, and like I don't understand that, right? Like there's no healing in keeping it to yourself, right? There's certainly, speaking of illusions, right? We can talk ourselves into anything in our head. And just being honest with yourself and the people around you, I think is pretty important to having a more peaceful and happy life. Like, why put on a mask for different people, right? Tell this person this thing, tell that person that thing, or different circles or levels of friendship. Like, there are people that exist out there that aren't really just trying to manipulate or hurt people, and they're just trying to be genuine, real to themselves and real to other people. Like,
yeah,
I've made it mostly a mission in my life to not do the thing that you're saying, right? People ask me how I'm doing. Like, if generally having a crappy day, I usually will just say, well, could be better, and I guess it would be up to the other person to engage on the opposite side of that. I'm not gonna overwhelm somebody with
right.
my woes in life drama, but
Yeah,
yeah, just being genuine, like I said, to yourself, and like who cares besides for yourself? And depending on what you're
Right.
doing, I guess there's some caveats here. But who really, like, who cares, right, about what other people think about you? I know me, and I mean, I guess you would care in some capacity if you're doing rude or mean things, but I don't really feel that's being a decent person, I suppose. Yeah, other than that, you want to be silly, you want to be talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, like knock yourself out, man. I mean, you'll find people. If you're happy and passionate and genuine and people care about you, then I think that goes a long way to one's own personal state, I suppose, if that answers your
Yeah.
question about honesty and um,
Yeah.
communication, I suppose.
Well, and that is one side of the equation. The other side is my favorite topic for all time, listening, right? The other side
Yeah.
is finding someone that can listen. I mean, you can probably find somebody that can listen to argue. You can probably find somebody to listen because it's the right thing to do with their ears, but not really listen to understand or listen to learn or, those kind of listening skills are really powerful. And as closed off as people are and as, busy as people are, like I've noticed, I would call it, and this is just me, I haven't read this anywhere, but I would say from what I'm gathering from all sources is it's a pandemic. I mean, I don't even know what's going with the suicide numbers, except that they're up higher than ever before. We can talk about veterans, but we
Yeah.
can also talk about, veterans primarily, are the not listened to people. Like, well, I better fill this guy out. He may have a Vietnam flashback, and kill everybody, which probably has never
Don't
happened,
want
but
that.
that's the thing that people think, and so it's like, well, I've had a conversation with somebody like that where I was the veteran, in the workplace, they were all kind of listening, and one guy was just kind of, so were you ever in combat? And, I was like, yeah, I've been to Iraq twice, Afghanistan once. Okay, so, you know, that sounds hard, and I can feel just like beating around the bush, seeing what pops out, just feeling for
Right.
information, trying to, you know, for me to, and I eventually got tired of it. I was like, if I'll only kill you on purpose. Like, don't worry, I won't kill you on accident. Like, if I will only kill you, and that didn't calm them down. Strangely, well, they calmed down a little bit because then it was like, okay, well, he knows what we're doing. The cat's, the cat's out of the bag, whatever. But at the same time, it's like, let's be honest. I'm a veteran, okay? I learned weapon safety. I will only kill somebody who's aiming a pistol and actively, or a weapon of some kind, actively firing it at me or someone close to me. But if you do that, well, I just want you to know that you checked all the boxes for allowing me, the 20 boxes, you just got done checking them all, and now I'm free, as a Marine, to convince you to not do that anymore, as however that goes. So, but yeah, it's like we're the safest population, but I would say we're the least listened to population, which also would go with we are the most suicidal population, especially Vietnam veterans.
Oh,
But
well.
that's just a fraction. That's just a fraction of the not listening that's happening in the world. But what were you going to say?
I was just gonna ask, why are veterans up there on the list of not listened to people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my one theory was that they're afraid of unleashing something or,
Oh,
you
okay.
know, well, and they want to be, people want to be sensitive too. And I don't want to take that away from them. Like, hey, I don't know. If you feel comfortable talk, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. The whole like coming across the room to tell me like, thank you for your service. And it's like, you're welcome. you know, it puts me in an awkward spot, but it
Yeah.
also like ends whatever conversation that could have happened. And for a while there, probably about 5 years ago, I was well into my transition from, a 20-year career in the Marine Corps to civilian life. And, somebody would ask me that and I'd say, man, I probably got on Facebook and said, stop saying stop thanking me for my service. How about you just take me out to coffee and let's talk? How about you
Right.
engage in me in a way that's meaningful? I'm like bubbling up with all kinds of problems coming out of the Marine Corps civilian life. I just want somebody to throw me a life jacket and talk to me and listen to me primarily for a little while.
Yeah.
You don't even have to say nothing. It's like going to a funeral. You don't have to say nothing. You just listen, nod your head. I mean, if you get a tear while listening to them, then perfect. Put your arms around them if you're that close to them, and they'll allow it, and just listen and sit with them. And I think that's a lot what a lot of veterans need, but don't know they need, and really probably are resistant to. So that's the other part of the coin. But the other side of the coin is, I want you to approach me, but at the same time, I want you to not approach me. So there's that. But
Yeah,
that's a lot.
yeah, I was actually just watching was it? There's and I forget what his name is, but the name of the podcast's called Soft White Underbelly, and he's got a lot of different perspectives. Like he talks to a lot of people, right? Between nurses and veterans
Yeah,
and people that have found themselves in unfortunate situations, I suppose, or with mental health issues. They like it was interesting to hear one veteran's take on his experience, like he real bad PTSD and oh, I wish I could remember his name. Anyways, he fought the whole time against his mental health issues, thinking that nothing was wrong,
yeah,
nothing was a problem. He needed to be a model Marine, I believe he was at the time. Nothing gets him down, even though he's, seeing some pretty grotesque and awful things in his time for being deployed and everything else. And yeah, when you talk about how some people like just need to be talked to, want to be understood or how, I mean, unfortunately, it's hard to navigate because I guess if you do identify a person that has like some sort of a incorrect way of handling things, at least from your perspective, it certainly doesn't do that other person any benefit to keep that to yourself, right?
right,
Just the compassion of another person to say something that's going to probably sound hard to the other person. Hey, I'm here for you if you want to talk about stuff, or I think maybe you could try thinking about things this way, or whatever. You risk like I guess like what you said, they're just worried that you might incite some sort of reaction or rage.
right.
You start asking too many questions, but yes, I agree. That
What?
I
Yeah,
could see how you feel that veterans have like a harder go with speaking about their mental health issues. It is almost kind of ingrained in you, right? Suck it up, adapt, overcome, you'll be fine.
right.
So I
Well,
think people rationalize that to themselves, nobody can understand or,
yeah.
mental health crisis.
Well, there's a point of hope here, though. It's like, what do we do? We're not going to solve the world's problems here, right? We might explore them and investigate them a little bit, but there is a point of hope, right? For everybody, for veterans to ride along with that. And like, let's start with veterans from my perspective. Like, I've worked with so many veterans, just like myself. And here's the really cool thing. The really cool thing is if I ever run into a Marine, we're family. Like, yeah, what years did you serve? I served, yeah. Okay, so you were over there at Camp Pendleton. Yeah, I was at Camp Pendleton from this to then. I was with the artillery or whatever, and it's like catching up with a person I've never even met before. So there's that. The other thing is, I can't tell you, well, it's been quite a few times when I'm just talking to a veteran or whatever, and he's like, I don't normally tell people this, but you, as a 20-year gunnery sergeant, you understand. And, while in reality, I probably don't. I've never been in a firefight. I wasn't blown up by an IED or even anywhere close. I had mortars blow up kind of close in my vicinity on base, but, it wasn't like, you know, that kind of combat, but they were in combat. But you know what? I did the funeral thing. I was like, yeah, no, tell me all about it, And I just sit there and listen. Man, that's hard. you know, and then for me talking to them, and perhaps from one veteran to another, as long as you're respectful, and they're gonna tell you some stuff, and you're gonna be get a chance to listen. And it's funny, I can see the lowest ranking, the 4-year grunt, get out, infantryman, from the Marine Corps. And he can listen to another person and they both get a little bit better, you know. And, I've got all kinds of tools at my disposal. I got a master's degree. I know PTSD. Well, here's some therapies that work really good with that. And, this one's kind of quick. This one takes a little longer, but they're all effective and they're kind of interesting and fun to do. So here you go, you know. So yeah, I've seen so many veterans, and maybe it's just the current era we're in that like get some hope, that try some of these therapies, that get better and have an even better life. I mean, because everybody needs some therapy, let's be honest, right? I mean,
Yeah.
anybody out here, anybody I run into on any day of the week could use, maybe a car crash. So I'm not trying to say something really malicious or terrible has happened to every person, but, a car crash or, even childhood neglect or even your parents yelling at each other. I mean, these are things that hit everybody a little bit different. And some of them send people careening off a path into the ditch for decades, and other people, only grow from the exact similar environment. So there's a lot of mysterious factors there, but there's hope. There's hope. And all these nonprofits that have sprung up, led by veterans, for veterans. I'll throw a quick plug on here for Creative Ed. Like, they hooked me up with a songwriter for free, and me and him composed a song for me about my life. And now they're going to teach me how to play it, all for free to me as a veteran. And that's there, and I can put a link in on somewhere. I don't know where, but I'll put a link somewhere, darn it, on Creative Eds. I'm still figuring all this out. So every veteran knows that you can get on the list and you can do this, and it can help you. And it has really helped some PTSD blown up veterans to write a song about their brothers in arms that died. I mean, just the amount of freedom they get from something like that. So there's a lot of hope out there, and it's not doom or gloom or anything. And anybody can start listening at any time. So, well, what do you got? You got any closing comments or rounding it out before we take off?
No, I mean, I think you wrapped it up beautifully, right? Like there is hope and there is help out there, for veterans or just any people in general to be able to
Yeah,
talk to and be understood and heard. And, it exists in the world. I mean, it seems rough sometimes, but, I would definitely encourage anybody that is suffering with any issues, mental health issues, to find a person, anybody, a counselor, a therapist, a pottery class for that matter, right? Just connect with
right.
other people, share yourself, be you, I mean, we can really paint whatever picture in our mind's eye, and it's the thing you're focusing on. Like we were talking about earlier, like with Honda Ridgelines, right? You're more aware of Honda Ridgelines, you're going to see more Honda Ridgelines. If you're more aware of how sad you feel and all that other stuff, everything around you is going to be sad and depressed. So, there's different ways to
Mm,
view and see things, and it's important to see how other people see it and, potentially incorporate their thoughts and beliefs into your own
yeah,
model of the world, and you can't really get that if you're not talking and opening up and sharing your life story and your experiences and perspective with other people. So
yeah.
that would be about the only thing to add to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for this time and for going down some rabbit holes with me. It's always a pleasure. So thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for stopping by and checking out Rabbit Holes with Aaron. If you want more information, Rabbit Holes with Aaron is on Facebook, on Patreon. Check us out. Let us know what you think. Thanks.